All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Aspiring VC podcast. Your host, Matt Snow with Mass Ventures here. And I have the pleasure of interviewing Asher Kraut at Starburst Aerospace. So before we get too into the weeds on anything technical, the important questions that all the listeners want to hear, Dunkin' or Starbucks, and why?
I'm a New Jersey guy at heart, so Dunkin' for sure. I Starbucks, I don't think it's really comparable though, in that the coffee is probably better, but you can't eat a cake pop versus like a donut. Like it's just like you gotta stop.
Yeah, well, you have passed my test. So the narrow gate is answering for Dunkin'. So that was a good answer there. So let's dive into some of the details. I guess like 2 minute summary, like who are you? What's the firm? What's your role? The basics.
Yeah. Well, so as you mentioned, Asher, I've been with the Starburst team for about getting closer to a year and a half now, which is crazy. We are a aerospace and defense focused global accelerator. We do a lot of consulting as well for both A&D corporates and government agencies around the world, working with the better part of 50 now, um, ranging from OEMs and operators to defense primes. And they will contract us. So someone like a Northrop Grumman, they'll come to us and they'll be, competing for some huge government program. And they will say, we don't have this capability to build this specific piece of the mission. What is the disruptive technology out there? Who are the players in the emerging marketplace? Help us understand that. Help us understand how you benchmark those companies against each other, and then make introductions where you see fit. So, we do a lot of that work still today. The nice piece about that is it's enabled us to build the accelerator platform, which is, in a lot of ways, a natural progression from that. We've built a impressive innovation stakeholder Rolodex, ranging from everyone like yourself at Mass to head of innovation and strategy at Northrop Grumman to the head of software in the U.S. Air Force to uh, the equivalent in the French Defense Innovation Agency. So it's been amazing, honestly. We've now worked in the accelerator program more formally with 40 startups, maybe even 45 soon, ranging everything from electric aircraft to space propulsion systems to small satellite launch to space communications to drones and UAVs. So all around the spectrum. But yeah, I mean, happy to dive into anything more specifically if you want to talk about the program or if you want to dive into the portfolio. My role, I guess, to finish off there is I oversee a lot of our deal flow. So primarily in North America and Asia, a little bit in Europe as well, and really helping source the most promising companies that we can bring through the program. And then eventually, we're raising a venture fund of our own right now. So that'll be a follow-on investor to the companies in the accelerator. But yeah, so pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, man. And you guys just had a big win recently. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we had two really notable ones that I think, in a lot of ways, are seeing the fruits of the labor for most of the team. Although I'm one of the newer members. Yesterday, Ampere, which was a portfolio company of ours that we met back in 2017, developing a hybrid electric powertrain for regional aircraft. So retrofitting existing planes and throwing in a hybrid electric powertrain. And they've done now multiple test flights from in Hawaii, from island to island. They've done it in California as well. And then yesterday announced officially that Surf Air is acquiring them for 100 million. So that's gonna be a pretty big one for us. We're super excited about that. The team there at Ampere is really amazing. And then the other one that was, I think, in a lot of ways crazier, because of how quick it happened. So 18 months ago, roughly, we started working with Momentous in the accelerator program, and that might sound ridiculous. Now they're a $1.2 billion SPAC. So within 18 months, you're seeing well past 20x on that, and that's like, I don't know that there's many things that can compare to that. So super exciting, awesome to see both of those successes, and we're hopeful that those will just be two of the many to come.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, man. I do want to like before we get too many questions on kind of your origin story and everything, it'd be great to just like make sure everyone understands all the programs being offered by Starburst, kind of the market gap that you guys came in to fill. I mean, I've just been so impressed with everything you guys are doing. And for any listener that doesn't already know, explain how you guys kind of like took over the space.
Yeah, sure. So the origination of Starburst is on the corporate side. So really, with SpaceX driving down the cost of launch so much, and data being demanded so much more, you had a number of startups and business models coming online. This is, I would say 5, 6 years ago. And so a lot of these corporates that have been, dominating the industry, for lack of a better phrase, for so long are now finally starting to realize that they have to play the startup game. They need to either start minority investing, partnering, or acquiring, however you want to play it. They've got to get in. And so to start, it was filling a corporate need. We were doing a lot of that consulting work, and then we really realized, like, wow, like startup investing and taking equity in these companies is the way to go. And so in a lot of ways, we realized the corporate need and said, well, we can help startups in a huge way, given this Rolodex and this like unique market positioning, in that we usually know what technologies these huge players are looking for when, which really helps guide our selection process. And so that's a little bit on the story of Starburst. The different programs, what we realized is that in aviation, space, and defense, and if you want to just talk deep tech in general, your traditional accelerator, in quotes, model doesn't really work, in that sales cycles are so much longer, product development takes so much more thought, energy, effort, and really sheer determination, that yes, early stage programs have a lot of value add. I give a lot of credit to the 13-week type early stage, like a Y Combinator, Techstars even, um, in that, ironing out that problem solution, learning how to be, learning some business acumen, all of that is super important. And so we've recognized that value, and we have a number of programs suited for companies at that stage. So the key differentiator with us, though, is that given our corporate network and our government ties, we've actually been able to fund those programs through federal funding, which is something you guys know all about at Mass. And so our latest program that's coming online this week actually is called Scale in LA. It's a 13-week early stage program for startups in the Los Angeles area or looking to make LA their home, that is completely equity free, completely everything free, no commitment for the company, but you get that same 13-week program. And the eventual goal for Starburst is, if you have a cohort of 10 of those companies and 2 of them are really promising, we bring them into our later stage accelerator, which is the program I work most closely with, and the one that you've seen more closely, which is a 12-month really seed to Series A program, giving founders that already have a product, they've already raised funding, the platform they need to get there. In such a highly regulated industry, it really is all about who you know, and not just that, kind of understanding how to play the game. And so past who you know, you also have to deal with what contracting vehicles can you get on to work with, let's say the Air Force, the Space Force. How do you work with a prime? What does that look like? Who do you speak to? How do you speak to them? Those are things that you can't learn in 13 weeks. You need much longer, and you need a program tailor made for that. And so that's what we've designed, that's what we've built, and that's we've been seeing a lot of success with that. We have a few other early stage programs around the world. One in Singapore that's aviation focused. It's called the Aviation Accelerator, 13-week program as well. Another one coming online in Paris called Blast, which is a consortium of players there. Another one in Israel, which is with one of our corporate partners, Israel Aerospace Industries. So I guess the very long-winded answer, all to say that we believe deep tech, if you want to de-risk it, which is like solely what we plan to do, we don't want to be a venture fund that is playing the same long tail investing game. We want to hit way more times than we lose. And doing that requires really deep strategy. It requires a lot of infrastructure and a lot of de-risking along the way. And so that's the model we've tried to build.
It is amazing, man. I love what you guys are doing, and I think it's such an important need. And these deep tech companies, it takes a lot to get them to be venture ready and to get to get them to commercialize. And it's so important that you guys are kind of there to fill in the gaps. So very very bullish and excited for everything Starburst going forward, as you know. So let's go on to what's kind of your origin story. How did you land in this role? What are some pivotal life experiences? It's not everyone that does has a role like yourself, especially in deep tech. So would love to hear this.
Yeah. So UCLA graduate. I originally came from New Jersey, which I mentioned in the Duncan comments. But when I came out to school in LA, I noticed that the traditional 4 or 5 career paths that I had known, which, for lack of, a better choice here would be like investment banking. So high finance, let's say you could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, and maybe you could be a teacher. There's a couple others that are thrown in there, right? But where I grew up, there wasn't this whole, oh, you could be a product designer, a product manager, you could be a venture capitalist, you can do all of that. Like tech really wasn't a thing where I grew up. And so coming out to California was opening of the aperture in a huge way. I saw a lot of people have a lot more free time, a lot more enjoyment out of what they did every day. They were doing what they believed to be impactful, which is a topic we can get into later. But nonetheless, they felt real meaning in what they were doing, not just doing it to pay the bills. And so, in a lot of ways, venture and technology, and in particular at that time, consumer really, I was something that I was interested in. Piqued my interest. I started working on a number of startups at school. I started working in the venture accelerator at UCLA Business School, and a couple of my friends and I tried to build. I don't know if I tried, but we were building a consumer tech mobile application. And in that process, I think I became tremendously, I guess, passionate for how do you take something that is not in existence outside of your head and make it interactable with other people you know. And so basically taking a product from not even square one, but zero to something. Um, and that was what I have become obsessed with. And so I think early stage venture in a lot of ways gives you a pretty good opportunity to see all of the different routes that founders come from, and how they think about solving problems. I've always been someone who's very problem solution focused. So like economics is certainly my backbone nowadays. I look at everything from why does this matter? Whose demand is this filling? What is the supply like already? What price floors exist? All that type of stuff, um, are what catches my interest. And I think deep tech in particular, you really have people solving the most real and critical of problems. It's not to say that I don't like consumer anymore. I do very much so enjoy using my iPhone and all of that, but I think that we have a critical need for entrepreneurs and really smart people to move into changing the way that carbon emissions are dealt with, to changing the way that healthcare is dealt with, changing the way that biotech is dealt with, changing the way that defense is done. So I think in a lot of ways it's very it's a critical need that I felt like I should commit to. And Starburst was the natural kind of merging of all the interests. It was deep tech, but more specifically, like fulfilling my astronaut love as a kid, as everybody has. It's an opportunity to be in a really fast moving company with a very clear mission. Um, and really see some of the most innovative technologies in the world and what level of resilience and attention to detail and real problem solving skills do you need to do those things. That is what drew me in, and I think that's what draws me in every day. So hopefully that answers some of your question.
Yeah, it was a great answer. And for any of our listeners who are audio only, I just want to point out that Asher has this epic background that shows the Earth from kind of a SATCOM satellite view. And that is kind of the deep tech Starburst Mass Ventures mindset, right? Is we're looking, like we're literally looking beyond Earth, and we're thinking about humanity needs to kind of land and expand. We have to fix energy. We have to fix all of these kind of huge problems, and it's kind of It's the type of thing that really makes it easy to get up every morning because it's so important and it's so crucial. So I loved your answer, man. Um, I do want to make sure we give some practical advice for the listeners. So a lot of our listeners are kind of trying to break an adventure. They might be students in school right now. They might have just started their career and a couple of years in. What are some of the kind of hacks and tips that you have for, what got you to Starburst on networking and, other important areas of that?
Yeah, I think number one hack that sometimes I'm scared to say because of the way people will react is you need to work, or you should work a lot harder than people think you should. There is a weird zeitgeist going around of work-life balance and that whole persona, and that's great. I'm not saying stick to your computer screen 24/7, but I am saying there is a lot of old wise adages out there that I'm sure our parents have distilled on us, which is like you need to work hard. Fundament, that's the truth, and I believe that very much so. And so I think if you want to get noticed, the quickest way to do that is to just be the person that everyone remembers, not necessarily because you're the smartest in the room, but because you are always there. You're always willing to help with whatever task someone needs help with. And I think that'll give you the most exposure to as many different, things you want to get into. So that's one. I think the second is really committing hard to your interest. And the first step in doing that is figuring out who you even are, who you want to be, what you like to do, where you can create value for the world, and kind of the intersection of all those. I think is what you should work on. And not enough people, and I didn't either, so a little bit guilty of this early on, spend enough time thinking about that. Um, if you want to get into a job out of college in particular, those are probably your most critical years in terms of growing your network and growing a lot of the residual value that you'll have for the rest of your career. And if you're not doing that in a space you want to be in, like long term, I think it's not to say you can't succeed, but you're going to have to restart your networking a lot, and that's going to be hard. So I think instead, just taking more time to be a lot more prescriptive about what you're doing makes a lot more sense to me. So I would say that those would be my two biggest pieces.
Totally. And I think that's a great transition because I did want to mention you had an amazing podcast interview on the Confluence podcast. It's Confluence VC for any of our listeners who are not familiar with it. We'll have links. But I think I'd like to touch on some of the comments you had there. Kind of encouraging people to find, like you're talking about, find what's the impact they want to have in life, having that early on rather than kind of going blind without that. And along that lines of kind of, I don't know, maybe steering some of our listeners into and kind of pitching them why deep tech.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why. I'll use a great headline that I read yesterday on TechCrunch, which is um, it was something about a new startup had raised $3.5 million in seed funding to, in quotes, modernize calendars. Um, I use Google Calendar every day. It's pretty modern for me. So when I think about how much smarts and resilience it takes to start a company and raise $3.5 million of seed, that's no easy feat, right? And so the thought to me of we have very smart people, and it's not just that one company. Like you can go down the list of TechCrunch every single morning, or Term Sheet, or wherever you get your news from. Imagine if all those people were working on problems that weren't already solved. Like modernization of calendars is solved, as far as I'm concerned. It's solved straight up. And so I can add to that by saying, and something I touched on in Confluence podcast, is that I have a lot of really, really smart friends who are working as product designers and project managers at, Facebook, Google, Amazon, etc. And that's amazing because they're surrounded by so many other smart people. But when you put that many smart people together, which is what they've intentionally done, these huge companies, kudos to them. And each person's only working on, this big of a text box on a screen this size when the whole product is bigger than the room, you got to ask yourself, like, how much problem solution skills are they really learning? I don't know that the answer is a lot, and I can tell you that in deep tech, if you look at the just quick problem solution statements, if you look at like Mass Ventures portfolio, Starburst portfolio, if there is a better place to build your problem solving skill set, then I would love to talk about that. But I don't know that there is. I really don't know that there is.
Yeah, man, that was a great answer. I think like the empathetic side too. I think it's getting people to see, right, like we can't keep running this world the way it's going. We have to change. Um, we have to make things more sustainable. We have to push forward into space. We have to start getting into these other planets, and we really kind of need to level up to basically a type 2 civilization. And I think it's kind of, I feel like, you've seen some of this with coronavirus and just all the stuff that's gone on lately. I think we kind of pushed the world forward maybe 10 or 15 years on a lot of different fronts. And, there's been a lot of pain, and it has not been good for a lot of people. But, maybe one good thing to come out of it is that, the world's kind of starting to wake up to what we need to do to shape up humanity to basically make it going forward.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point too of like, and this is something I talked about on Confluence as well, which is that there are fundamental problems we are continuing to propagate that we don't have solutions for. So unless really smart people start working on them in the next 10 to 15 years, there's gonna be a lot of problems people don't want to deal with that we easily could have just solved in the interim. And you can go down the list. I mean, you touched on them: sustainability, space communications, all that. But and that's not even getting into any of the biotech related stuff. Especially you bring up Corona, like how does that happen? It shouldn't almost like if you have a car that drives itself, how do we have multiple billion people that are basically shutting down the world because of a virus? Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and like I said, there's been a lot of pain, and a lot of it has been tough. But I think if we can have more people driving into this deep tech world, both on the founder side and the investor side, and as their students pursuing more technical knowledge. I mean, there's all this online education. I mean, unbelievable amount of education on video and podcasts. I think if we can drive people to these areas, we can really start to change the world. I know it sounds corny, but that's kind of what it's about.
For sure. I mean, I'm particularly optimistic because I think that being an economics guy at heart, markets do correct themselves. And so you're going to start to see a lot of these modernization of calendar type investments go south very, very quickly. Um, and when that does happen, you're going to have massive opportunity and the best timing ever for a lot of these deep tech related business models. And that I think is going to bode really well. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Absolutely. And, I will just do a quick plug and say that, as one of the 20 oldest venture firms in history at Mass Ventures, known as Mass Technology Development Corporation is our technical name for anyone who cares. We've always been on kind of the forefront of where the industry has been going from the 80s to now. And, we have identified deep tech as the gap. I think Starburst sees it as the gap. And I think, a lot of capital is beginning to flood in here. And you mentioned one of the wins on the SPAC earlier. I think there's a lot of positive market development that's kind of gearing up to shift all this, up and to the right. So,
Yeah.
excited for that. One last thing before we get into some of the rapid fire questions I want to ask is let's hit the nail on the head. What impact do you want to have in this world? What is it that you want to see most changed by founders? Is it humans getting on Mars? Is it longevity tech, total clean energy for the planet? What are you most excited about? And what do you most want to see happening?
Yeah, I think on a personal note, I want to be somebody that dramatically changes mindsets. And I think right now we are very comfortable as people. We don't like thinking differently, even though this whole contrarian thing has come about. There's really only a handful of people that are truly different thinkers. And if you look at like the founding of the country, like we're still reading stuff from them. I don't think the same will be true for the last 50 years. And so I would like to try and help rewrite that script. So when you talk about like what impact do I want to have, I want to show people, I think in my path in particular, I didn't know anything really about aviation, space, or defense, but it doesn't really matter as long as you're willing to think differently and execute. And I think we've seen that in a number of our portfolio companies. We've seen that in a number of companies we didn't invest in that became really successful. And I would like to contribute to rewriting that script. And then I think on a more practical note, like definitely pain points that hit the heart warm for me would be sustainable aviation. I mean, we're as somebody who loves to travel, just coming back from Hawaii, I mean, we are so close to that technology being certifiable. Ampere just one example, but Zero Avia is another one doing hydrogen. And there's a number of other companies. So particularly optimistic on that side of things. I would love also the opportunity to actually be able to text and drive and not drive, because I kind of do that a little bit too much right now, and I would like to be a little bit safer. Uh, so that is a fun one. I think hypersonic flight would be super cool. Like, why should it take so long to get to Japan? Um, I would love to meet you for lunch tomorrow and come back here for dinner, but that's like not really realistic right now. Um, those are a couple on Earth, and then yeah, I mean, if I can get to Mars, I'm signing up tomorrow at a affordable price point. So let me know when that happens. But yeah, those are a couple.
That was awesome. And two points I want to bring up for the listeners there. One is, I would say everyone should check out this book, The Case for Space by Robert Zubrin. And one of the awesome things he talks about in the book is surface to surface travel on Earth. So I don't know how many people are thinking about this already, but we have all this amazing space tech that's going to be developed. But the way to make it economically feasible, potentially one of the ways to make companies like SpaceX way more economically feasible, is using that technology for surface to surface flight on Earth. Maybe you could go Miami to Tokyo, or some crazy long flight that's normally 10, 20 hours. Maybe you could do it in 2 hours, right? And then that can fuel the economic engine for pushing out into space. So excited on that. And then another thing that you hit on that would be great to mention is that you don't have to have. We want you to learn about everything, but you don't have to have a chemistry degree or a bio degree to like go into deep tech. Like neither of us had technical degrees, and here we are in this field. And you just have to have creativity, passion, and just be a continuous learner.
I think one thing that maybe we're undermining a little bit is I think there's a lot of value in knowing how to find those people though. So even if you don't have those skills yourself, you need to know how to surround yourself with people that are technically capable, because those are who drive the world forward, for lack of a better phrase. So I guess I would just caveat to say that yes, great to have grandiose vision, great to be like economic thinkers, but at the same time, there are people who can like make something non-hackable, and there are people that can tell you how to do that. You need both. One isn't going to get you there without the other.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, are you ready to go into rapid fire?
Yeah,
All
I'll
right,
try to answer them as short-winded as possible.
cool. First one, who's been one of your most important mentors? It could be another VC or founder, someone technical researcher, professor, and what's like a lesson or a quote that they've said that like still stays in your mind today?
Yeah, Van Espabodi from Starburst. He's one of the co-founders. He's kind of taken me under his wing as like a young person working with him, which I'm eternally grateful for. I think the quote or just mindset of his that is most impactful on my everyday is really like the system is like there to be broken, and people that follow the system really limit themselves. And if you're willing to go against status quo on everything you do, you can't just at times choose to go against the system. Like he is adamant about every opportunity you get, you need to go against what everyone else is doing. You cannot pick and choose opportunities, because that's when you run the risk of like wasting time. And like probability wise, if you pick and choose, you are limiting what your impact could be versus just like playing real venture. Like, so finance aside, a real venture is taking shots, right? And so like the fewer you take, the slower your chance of that long tail return. So you got to be taking them every time. So I think I just love that whole break the system, be different, and not different in the sense of like wear a different color shirt, but say things that people have never heard, do things people have never heard, and you'll usually see some pretty good results.
That is a great quote. Wow. Um, Next rapid fire one. Who's one of your favorite VCs outside of the firm, and like why them? Why their fund?
Yeah. I'll give you a couple. I spoke to Sean McGuire the other day from Sequoia, and I really, really liked his perspective on a number of different deep tech related topics. But it's particularly inspiring to me that he is at a generalist fund in Sequoia, one of the like most storied investors in the game, and he chooses to make his own personal focus area on some of the most important problems in the world. And I mean, he's a partner there. He is indirectly involved with billions and billions of dollars in transactions. And at any point, I'm sure he could decide, I would like to do this consumer deal, or I'd like to do this direct to consumer, whatever, like same product we've seen 500 times. And no one would bat an eye because the guy's been insanely successful. I mean, he's an early investor in SpaceX. He's an investor in Spin Launch, which has done well. He's an investor in IonQ. So there's a number of companies that he's really succeeded on, and he continues to just choose to focus on the problems we're talking about, and that's, I think, pretty inspiring. He also has a pretty insane personal background. He built and sold an $800 million company to Palo Alto Networks. And that was after he did some time working in Afghanistan with DARPA. So, I mean, just an awesome dude, like super, super raw as well. It was just a pretty candid conversation.
That's pretty awesome, man. Maybe we'll have a chance to get him on this podcast in the future. Who knows? What's one of your favorite startups and why?
There's so many. There's so many. Um, it feels like a great opportunity to give some clout to a Starburst portfolio company. So in that regard, let's see, I'll give you a couple. One is Skyloom. I think is particularly interesting. They are trying to answer the question of like the insane data demand. So there's so much data what we are requiring with every additional smart device that goes online. How do you get that to the ground fastest from space? And so what Skyloom has been able to do is create a basically laser optics system that can link satellites and deliver the data from satellite to satellite and pass it down as quick as possible. They're developing in geo so they can cover much faster. So that's one that I think is particularly exciting. From like a futuristic standpoint, Red 6 is unreal. Developing augmented reality for fighter pilot training. The thought of going 40,000 feet up in a fighter pilot, throwing on an augmented reality headset and fighting against a fake Russian pilot is just like literally out of a video game. So definitely a fun one.
That's awesome, man. You guys have just the coolest companies. I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty amazing. What are the top podcasts, books, blogs that you'd recommend for some listeners, both VC and the deep tech stuff?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of books. One is on the venture side. It's called VC in American History by I think Tom Nichols, and it really chronicles how did we get here today from the original venture investments being like the cotton gin. Like how did we get to a point where we're investing in such little marginal improvement versus we're going to fundamentally redefine the way that you make clothes or you like refine cotton. Like it's pretty mind-blowing stuff, and I think it's a humbling read for a lot of investors that think we are so smart, we created this whole venture system. Like no, it's largely existed for the entire birth of the nation. So that's one. Another one on like a more personal standpoint that's been super humbling, and I still suck at this but I need to get better, is called Ego is the Enemy. It's like really slaps you around quite a bit, and it's talks about how everything you do, say, or feel is just within your own lens, and you need to stop looking at it from such a personal standpoint. Anything that happens in your life, whether it's an event or a decision, and start to like really understand people's positions, but understand that you'll never understand them. So that is something I really like. And then the third one that I suppose is just like entrepreneurial related is Ben Horowitz's, I think it's What You Do Is Who You Are, which was like a follow up to his first book. And he talks a lot about what I said earlier, which is the idea that people remember your actions. They don't remember anything you say to them, really. And you always want to be someone that is known for something you did rather than something you said. And that's super impactful, I think.
Awesome, man. Those are some great recommendations. So got two questions left here for the outros. First one, taking this from Tim Ferriss, what's a purchase of like $100 or a couple hundred that has most improved your life?
Yeah. So when I first read this question, first thing that comes to mind is TSA pre-check. And I know that that's so ridiculous because we're like aero focused, but it's $85 for 5 years. Like it's one of the best deals in America.
Yeah, that is a pretty amazing one. I will say kudos to you for a smart answer there. Let's get the plugs. Where can people find you on Twitter, LinkedIn, the Confluence and Altum groups, and Medium, like everything, man?
Yeah, so Twitter at Asher Kraut, so just my name there, all lowercase, and then LinkedIn is Nathaniel Asher Kraut. Nathaniel's my first name legally, for those that don't know. So those are two really good resources. If you're a startup that's working on something pretty cool, hit me up at Asher at Starburst.aero. Always down to talk. And then let's see what else. I'm on Confluence as well. So if you're in the Confluence Slack group, feel free to DM me. I'll answer your thing probably at times that I shouldn't, as well as in Ultim. So shout out to Jai for that pretty amazing group. So yeah, I mean, pretty much hit me up wherever. If you can find me somewhere, just reach out and I'll probably answer. If not, it's not because I don't want to. I probably just don't have that minute, but I'll get around to it. So yeah, looking forward to hopefully chatting with some of you guys.
Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think it was an awesome conversation. I hope you enjoyed it too. And, hope to have you back sometime.
Most definitely. I'm excited to come back in like year 2 of the podcast and like see how things have changed.
Yeah, it'll be a fun journey, man.
Okay.
All right. Catch you later.
Talk to you later, Matt.
Looking to innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.